I'm gonna have to ask you to forgive me for a lot of things today because I have a bad camera, my setting is different, I don't have a lot of time, and I don't have a script, but history doesn't stop for anything, so neither do we. That being said, today we're going to talk about the rise of Napoleon. I would love to talk about all of Napoleon, but what a guy. So much in such a small package. We're going to go right into it and just talk about how he got his power and his rise there. First, though, I need to excuse myself for the height joke. He actually wasn't that short. He was just short in comparison to the really big bodyguards he kept around him. So no height jokes in the comments. Now let's talk about Napoleon for a second. If you watched the intro video, which I'm sure most of you didn't bother to do, I mentioned that I love a really cool thing about Napoleon was that he was born in Corsica, which is a French colony, but right after it became a French colony. So he was actually barely a citizen, which is cool, but not important right now. His father was a common person who bought himself the title of Count, which is the lowest form of noble. He bought it so he could send his kids to military school, and then he did. Napoleon went to military school, but all of the aristocrats made fun of him a lot. So he ended up hating the aristocracy, which meant when the French Revolution came around, he loved it. He said, yeah, screw the aristocracy, screw the king, screw the church, screw them all. And he joined the revolution, and he ended up becoming a top military officer for the army during the revolution. As that happened, he did a few really key things. The first was the retaking of Toulon. Toulon was this little French city in the north, and it was taken by the Austrians. And as a top-ranking French military officer, they sent him out to take it. And he did. And he recaptured it mostly with artillery fire, because he really liked artillery. He really liked shooting at people. So he took Toulon back, and then they said, you know, we're going to make you the #1 military officer in mainland France. Then they decide, you know, let's expand. Let's go take Italy. So they go to northern Italy, where Austria is, and they make Napoleon in charge. He ends up taking that. And he takes every single one of those cities that he was targeted at. He takes over North Italy using mostly artillery, because he likes shooting things. Then he becomes a top military officer in all of France. Anyway, and this is in the 1790s. That's in 1797. In 1799, he decides to take over the government. You know, the revolution's over. The king's been dead for 7 years now. And he decides to just go and take over the government. So he takes all his soldier friends and his army friends, and he walks into the Parliament building and says, I am taking the government. It's mine now. Takes him 2 days, but he does it. What happens? It makes him head of state. He's still head of state of a democracy, but he's head of state. 1799, he publishes a new constitution. Now, what the constitution says is it makes him first consul, which is head of state. It's actually quite progressive. It says a lot of really good things about taxation and all kinds of things like that. Great. 1802, the Revolutionary Wars are done, which is really important because it's what made Napoleon popular, but we'll get to that in a minute. In 1802, he decides to appoint himself first consul for life. And he gets to appoint the next first consul, which is a little bit ridiculous. When he proposed it to the parliament, they said, well, that's stupid, we're going to vote against it. And he said, you know, I'm a Democrat. I'm going to propose this as a referendum to the whole nation of France, which he did. And he was hugely popular. So he won. It helps that the person who was in charge of tallying the votes was Lucien Bonaparte, his brother, but he won, and he becomes first consul for life. 2 years later, he gets bored being first consul for life, and he decides to appoint himself Emperor Napoleon I. And the parliament goes, no, we're not doing that, because then we don't have any power, because he was going to take away all the legislative power of the parliament. So he goes, I'm a Democrat, I'm going to take it to a referendum. Then he does, and he wins again. So he is now Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte I. Now the real question is, why was he able to do that? Why did he win these referendums? He was hugely popular with the people. He was hugely popular with people because of a few reforms that he kept from the revolution, a few reforms from the revolution he got rid of, and a few reforms from the revolution a few new reforms that no one had instituted before. One of the things, we'll start by talking about taxation. Before the revolution, taxation was the most for the poor and the least for the rich. The rich weren't taxed. Napoleon keeps the idea from the revolution of progressive taxation. The more money you have, the more you pay. Pretty smart. The second issue is religion. During the beginning of the revolution, the power of the church was decreased, but it wasn't gotten rid of. During the second phase of the revolution, the Jacobin extremists got rid of the church completely. What Napoleon decides to do is kind of take a middle ground. He brings the Pope back in with a peace he signs in 1802 called the Concordat, where he brings the Pope back into power over the clergy. The clergy are paid a nice salary by the government. You're allowed to have whatever religion you want, and Catholics can have their Pope back as the center of authority for their religion. So Catholics, which are the huge majority of the population, love Napoleon. Then he made it even better because there used to be a church tax where every person had to pay 10% of everything they owned to the church. He made that not obligatory anymore, which made people even happier because who wants to pay? The last issue was the aristocrats. The aristocrats, a lot of them had left during the revolution because they were either getting killed or getting taxed heavily. He does this thing called émigré amnesty. Any émigré that comes back, any aristocrat that had left the country but comes back, is now not going to be tried as a counter-revolutionary, will not be killed, but they don't get their land back that they had given away. So the ones who came back were mostly ones who still had land left. As a result, a lot of people like Napoleon. It's as simple as that. Everyone likes him, so when he runs for things, he gets it. That's the rise of power for Napoleon. I didn't say it very eloquently, and I didn't say it very organized because I don't have time. But I will leave it at that because I have a feeling Heather will cap off Napoleon for you next time. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys next time.